everyone, and welcome to Flip the Script Season 1, Episode 5, Prospects Who Are a Pain in the Butt and Who Aren't Active on LinkedIn, and How to Personalize to Them. My name is Beck Holland. I'm the CEO and founder of Flip the Script. Before we jump into the content, if you do me a small favor, go to flipthescript.co and make sure to download the deck so that you can follow along. So let's jump in. So first thing first, I want to give a word of disclosure. So typically, whenever people are watching some of these types of approaches and they say like, oh, okay, well, if someone is writing some kind of article or someone is engaging with some kind of content, or if they're your typical marketing or sales ICP, they're all over LinkedIn, but what about me? What about someone who is selling into a technical buyer persona, or someone who's selling into a CIO, or someone who's selling into a CFO, for instance? Full disclosure, most of the time when it is not easy. Meaning you have to really think through someone's profile and like what kind of articles are they writing about and how can I make that hook. So most of the reps that I've worked with in the beginning, they try and do low-hanging fruit of like endorsements, the skills acquired, etc. And like best case scenario, the about section. But I really have to push them into those top two buckets regardless of what buyer persona that we're selling into. So I know people in their minds, they think like, oh, well, if you're selling into a sales buyer persona, then this comes kind of in the box and everyone's active on LinkedIn. But the truth is, with anything that's really, really good that you're going to get a great response rate for, you have to dig a little bit and you have to put some effort into it. So regardless of who you are, I would say like the first two or three buckets within the personalization buckets of like any kind of self-authored content, any kind of engaged content, or any kind of self-identified traits, even if you're selling into a sales buyer persona or a marketing buyer persona who are the most active on LinkedIn, you still have to make a commitment to the realization that personalization is going to be a really fancy pattern interrupt in essence, and it's really going to get my prospects' attention. And again, this is based off of 4 teams that I've done this with now so far, but most of the people that I've seen that have deployed this in the industry after watching these videos, they aren't selling into a sales or marketing persona and they're still seeing the results. So this session, I'm going to uncover what if someone is literally no activity on LinkedIn? I'm talking they don't like anything, they don't share anything, they have no self-authored content, they do no posts, they do no webinars, and I want you to hold yourself to the standard that if they do, okay, there's probably going to be some kind of hook or premise I can find and relate back in, but if they don't do anything, then this is the following strategy that I would take. Again, I'm coming from this state of mind of knowing templates. I've seen templates of all kinds of different methodologies, and I have seen it not work anymore. It worked in the beginning when we were using it with sales engagement, and now I just don't see people responding to it. So I haven't seen a team out there that is seeing massive results with templates, especially if it's within B2B and especially if it's within B2B SaaS. So I'm kind of taking that as a constant of like, okay, personalization is part of the puzzle that we have to figure out regardless of the organization. And then we have to learn, full disclosure, how to tie that into relevance. But let's start with, if they are no activity on LinkedIn, what would I do? So step number 1, the first bucket, and this is probably going to be the easiest bucket for you, is self-identified traits. So even though I mentioned in the personalization section, if someone signs up on LinkedIn, and most people are on LinkedIn, you know, financial buyers, HR buyers, CIOs are on LinkedIn, you know, SEO experts are on LinkedIn, backend engineers are on LinkedIn. Usually, especially if you're within B2B SaaS, you're going to have some kind of profile on LinkedIn just because social media is so prevalent. When you sign into LinkedIn, when you originally signed up, I want you to think through your mindset. Originally, the use case for LinkedIn is people wanted to find an online way to represent their resume. So as a piece of that, whenever they created an account on LinkedIn back in the day, they basically signed in and they thought, I'm going to use this as a resume. So ergo, within the about section or within the company line or headline or profile line, I'm going to say things that I focus on, say things that I excel at, or say things that are really an expertise of mine because I want to sell myself to people who are going to be viewing me on LinkedIn. Because of the genesis of that creation of LinkedIn, you're going to see in people's about section, company line, and profile line, 90% of the time these are filled out, meaning someone says something about themselves, because in the box, very rarely do you sign into LinkedIn, put up a profile picture and say nothing about yourself. Like, this is part of the profile setup. So The first place I would go to that's a low-hanging fruit is people will say something about what they do or focus on, regardless of what buyer persona they are, whether that's sales, whether that's tech, whether that's back-end or marketing. They will have their about section usually filled out, or their profile line or company line. So I would search through those and say, is there any wording, premise, hook, etc. that I could tie into my product and what we do? If I can't find that, anything there, if they simply don't have those on their LinkedIn profile, then I would go to number 2, which is the junk drawer. The junk drawer is going to be really anything that's a little lower hanging fruit and usually not that business related to someone based on their social media accounts, LinkedIn primarily. But this is comprised of all the different variables that you see here. You've got schools attended, personal interests, hobbies, recommendations, skill endorsement, mutual connections, Twitter, and Facebook. And again, whenever you're teasing out some kind of personalized premise, you have to think through it in terms of what can I choose here that I can then relate back to what my product does. So you might think you're going out on a limb here. And again, I'm going to do a session on how to hook personalization to relevance to make sure that in every case scenario that you're relevant. But I'd be thinking through, how can I hook this? So I will give you a crazy example. I once was working for a conversation intelligence vendor, and I was prospecting into someone who wrote an article about GDPR and found a way within under 2 minutes to write an email to that person, hooking GDPR to sales skills, and got the meeting in seven minutes later. So it can be done. A lot of different buyer personas that really tend towards this are marketing, HR, sales leaders, SDR leaders, any kind of go-to-market strategy, that side of the house, customer success, AMRM, cross-sell, upsell, renewal. Like those are the people that really like this. But in either case scenario, I would be looking through, is there any information about this person on their LinkedIn profile, that I can then hook back into my buyer persona. If I can't find self-identified traits, they don't talk at all about themselves on LinkedIn, and there is nothing within the junk drawer that you can hook, I would then transition into demographic data. So this could be career trajectory, time in their role, recent job change, or types of company. Again, you want to relate this back to whatever your product does. So, if you could say like, hey Scott, reason for my outreach is I noticed that you just joined outreach and you've been there for about 3 months in a sales leadership role. I imagine that as a new VP of sales, you probably are focused on these 3 things: getting your team up and running, understanding who are your best reps and who need the most work, and how can you make an impact very quickly. What if you could understand who are your best reps at the click of a button, and help the reps that are struggling to get up to quota very quickly so you can make an impact within the organization within the first 90 days. So you want to think through, like, within these demographic premises, again, that's career trajectory, time and role, recent job change, and types of companies. What is your prospect, based on their work history, communicating to you in terms of how they're geared? So if I look at someone's profile and I say like, oh, they were at Oracle for 25 years, and then they just transitioned over to a company like Outreach, then that's an enterprise into an upper mid-market company that's, what I would guesstimate at just pre-IPO and a Forbes unicorn. So there's probably a lot of, there's a couple different nuances in those kind of organizations. So these are probably the things they're going to be looking for and what would help a smooth transition, and then do back of the bar napkin math of how my product would fit into that. So you want to take a look at someone, and you essentially want to, in a very positive term, profile them based on what their career setup is and how you could envision helping them based on their demographic setup. Number 4, their firmographic setup. So if you can't find anything, again, within these first 3 buckets, junk drawers, self-identified traits, or them in specific in terms of their role, I would go to firmographic. So firmographic is going to be any detail about the company that they work for and how can you hook that back into your product. So a quick tip here, this about section for all of your companies is going to be gold. So any company who's a real company typically is going to have a profile on LinkedIn, including me, even though I'm like one person, right? Okay, I have an about section. It has something in there. And so it can be a quick tip of, I just click into the company profile and I read the about section. And is there anything in that about section that I can then hook into what my company does? So you'll, again, see a bunch of rich language in there because it's typically a marketing team trying to hook prospects But what they do in terms of what you'd be interested in is they give you a lot of data that you can hook into your value prop. So with anything firmographic, if I can't find something out about, whatever, max and specific or outreach, or a max and specific in terms of junk drawer self-identified traits, I'm going to go, okay, Max is the former CEO of Sales Hacker, and he is, a VP of marketing over at Outreach. And so what can I learn about Outreach? What's the about section for Outreach, or website language, blogs, IPO, M&A, case studies, press releases, hiring? Like, you understand, like, here's the comprehensive list, but here are all the details about this company. And I want to find a demographic detail that I can then tie back into my product. So my full disclosure suggestion would be, you need to spit some kind of detail in the first line that's specific to their company with some kind of quote marks around it, because you want to communicate to your buyer that you don't know them in terms of industry segment. This wasn't just put into a mass blast cadence where you rip through an entire MarTech industry. You know their company in specific, so you have earned the right to be there because you know exactly who they are, and you have a very customized, very vetted out pitch that you think that you can add value within. So again, if you can't find anything on Max in specific and junk drawer self-identified traits or anything that he's done in his career, then you're going to go on to firmographic premises and go to Outreach in specific. And the last bucket, if you can't find anything about the company that you can then tie in on the website or blog posts, hiring, M&A, anything there, then I would then, very lastly, just because I haven't seen it work too well, go into just buyer persona relevance templates alone. Full disclosure, full stop. Relevance is very, very important in Outreach. Understanding someone's buyer persona is chief of mind for me when I'm sending any email. If you don't know who you sell into and what they care about and how you can speak to those pain points in terms of your product, then it makes it insatiably hard to sell. So you need to understand your buyer and their day-to-day before you do anything else. However, the reason that I'm listing this bucket last is because the keys to the kingdom is picking out something about that person and then hooking it into the buyer persona relevance other than just being buyer persona relevant alone. So you will still get some business off of templates, meaning you're going to mass blast and every once in a while a blind squirrel gets a nut, right? You're just going to find some people that are in market for some of for some of your software, and you just sent them the right email at the right time. But how you can really put the gas on your prospecting efforts and make them meaningful to the person is always keeping this in mind in terms of what they care about, but hooking that to a personalized premise. So the reason I put this last, and I put buyer persona, and I put my last company's value ICT that we sold into, so sales enablement operations at sales leader, SDR leader, and revenue leaders. But essentially the last thing I would do if I can't find anything, can't find their company stuff that I could tie in, firmographic stuff that I could tie in, demographic stuff that I could tie in, junk drawer that I could tie in, self-identified traits, engaged content, or self-authored content, then I guess I would be strong-armed into doing only buyer persona templates alone that I could then hypothetically kick out to 200 or 300 people. I would not suggest this. I think it gobbles up your TAM, and I don't think that you innately get the results, the quantity of meetings and the kinds of meetings in terms of quality and in terms of person that you want in the room. However, if you have nothing, then I would go ahead and just talk about their role and things that typical buyer persona cares about. So that's all the content for today. If you like today's session and you want to check out more sales topics and sessions, go to flipthescript.co, and there's going to be a content library there for you. And speaking of LinkedIn, if you go to Flip the Script on LinkedIn and give us a follow, there'll be more behind the scenes updates located there. Hope you have a great day.